I'm Ashmita and I have Shubhendu with me, and today we are exploring the argument that speed is a form of amnesia and we need slowness to truly remember not just the past but the present in all its fullness. We are going to connect the ideas of Milan Kundera, Aristotle, and Hannah Arendt. In our previous episode in the Slowness series of Anticlockwise, we talked about the necessity for inhaling the fragrance of time slowly with the philosophy of Byung-Chul Han. Be sure to check it
Check
out.
it out, yeah.
Let's start today with Kundera. He is closer to our time and our lives, and then we will move to Aristotle and finally to Hannah Arendt.
Yes, Milan Kundera makes this really interesting argument that speed is a form of amnesia in his novel Slowness. It's a philosophical novel and highly recommended. He has this great quote there that the degree of slowness is directly proportional to the intensity of memory, and the degree of speed is directly proportional to the intensity of forgetting.
Can you maybe summarize the novel a bit and give a bit of context to the quote?
Yeah, sure. So what happens in Slowness is Kundera stages a collision between two knights at the same French chateau hotel separated by 200 years. On one side, in the past, we have an 18th century chevalier knight who moves with a sort of deliberate slowness, understanding that the longer it delays his pleasure, the deeper it gets imprinted on his memory. On the other hand, we have a modern French man, I think his name is Vincent, who treats his night like a sort of performance, rushing towards pleasure that ultimately leaves him empty and humiliated. Kundera then uses this contrast to propose an existential equation that the degree of slowness gets tied to the intensity of memory, and speed is a form of escapism. He also uses the analogy of a motorcyclist who is so fast that he kind of gets into this mode of forgetfulness.
Yeah. I think our endless scrolling on social media, for example, is actually a subconscious desire
Mm.
to escape our own history and disconnect ourselves from the weight of the past.
Yeah, I think that's Kundera's main point, that speed is a kind of drug for forgetting, and that perfectly matches with our condition. Yeah, and I must also mention the way Kundera mourns the loss of true indolence, kind of being with one's own time in modernity that
Yeah,
is lost.
yeah, and the novel was published in the early 90s, I think. So that is pretty much our dawn of the internet, the
Yeah, yeah,
pre-internet days.
yeah,
Yeah.
true, true. The world has only gotten much faster. So Kundera says that in the modern world, indolence has turned into what is called having nothing to do. So, which is a completely different thing from indolence. According to Kundera, a person who has nothing to do is frustrated, bored, and is constantly searching for the activity he lacks. It's a relationship of lack, while indolence is a positive thing. It's related to leisure.
Yeah, that reminds me of the Greek
Hmm.
distinction between leisure and amusement. So, in the Politics, Aristotle actually distinguishes between amusement, which he calls Anapausis, and leisure, which is Scholé. What we do in the weekend, let's say Netflix just crashing, that is amusement. It's sort of biological necessity. You work so hard that your body just gives in, and you need to rest to fix the machine so it can work again, right?
Yeah, so the fact that we have tied amusement with a necessity is, in Aristotelian philosophy, is the enemy of freedom. Anything that is tied to necessity is actually a form of unfreedom.
Exactly. So leisure, Scholé, is about freedom. For Aristotle, you only have leisure when you are doing something for its own sake,
Mm.
not to get paid, but because it is a good thing. So solving a math problem just to see the answer, that would be leisure. Playing music, not for the concert, but just to hear the notes, that would be leisure.
Yeah, solving a math problem can never be a leisure
No.
in my book.
Yeah, these Greek philosophers were polymaths, so maybe it was pleasure for them.
Yeah.
But in any case, the distinction between leisure and amusement is really important here. He writes in his treatise, Politics,
Mhm.
and I'm going to quote here: granted that work and leisure are both necessary, yet leisure is the desired end for which work is done. So think about that. You don't rest so you can work better. You work so that you can have leisure. Leisure is the point of being alive. But this leisure is not mere frivolity. It is not, merely amusing ourselves as an end in itself and by itself, but through the pursuit of gymnastics, say music or liberal arts, and ultimately through the pursuit of wisdom.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Aristotle, it's really important to remember that the Aristotelian good life is a form of action. It's called eudaimonia. It's kind of a conscious cultivation of leisure. And that is in a really sharp contrast to how we use the word relaxation now. We have a pretty toxic definition of it. It basically means starting of the brain. And yeah, we think kind of numbing ourselves with all these things, TV, alcohol, or scrolling, and so on, is what leisure is. But in order to have a really free time, philosophically free, we need a conscious cultivation of leisure.
Yeah. Okay, but why does all this relate back to the question of memory? That's our central question today.
Right, right. Yeah, thanks for bringing it back to the question of memory. So, Aristotle has this short treatise, which is really important, titled on memory and reminiscence, or memory and remembrance. Here, he makes a really interesting distinction between memory and remembrance. Memory is sort of a passive remnant of the past, but remembrance is the past that needs an active recalling.
And he has different words for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So memory is neme and recollection is anamnesis. And Aristotle says that many animals have memory. A dog remembers his or her master, for example, but only humans have recollection. And he introduces the famous metaphor of the seal and the
Oh,
wax,
yes.
where
It's a
kind
good
of,
one.
yes, kind of the remembrance is all these different kind of seals that are there in our mind, and it really becomes important philosophy later in John Locke, for
Yeah,
example.
but that's another episode.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to digress. So in De Anima, or on the soul, Aristotle argues that perception stamps a physical impression, a phantasm onto the soul, like a ring on the wax to create memory. He explains really interestingly why little children and old people have bad memories. If the wax is soft like a child, then the image blurs. If the wax is too hard and frayed, like in an old person, the ring makes no mark. The memory is a storehouse of all these different seals, and the remembrance is about finding the right seal from that archive.
And do you think that it's a very materialist view?
Yeah, it surely is very materialist in the
Yeah,
physiological
that's what I
sense.
mean.
So, what strikes me most about how Aristotle treats remembrance is that he understands it not just as some kind of a random storage box, but as a specific relationship with time.
Yeah, because recollection is a form of logic, isn't it? We
Mhm.
need to piece together the past.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So memory is passive. It's just the image of the past, which is still staying in the mind, which was drafted on the mind. Recollection is sort of an active logical search. And Aristotle calls it a form of syllogism or inference. So you are literally hunting through your brain, moving from one moment to the next to find the missing piece. And he outlines the laws of association in remembrance that we still use in psychology today: similarity, contrast, contiguity, etc. And I actually love the example he gave. So he says that if you want to remember autumn, for instance, you do not directly remember it. You have all sorts of weird associations. So you, for instance, can think of the mist, which can lead to the milk color white, which can lead to moist, and finally autumn. So you have all these kinds of
Oh, okay.
interesting
Interesting. That's
associations.
kind of weird, but
Yeah.
okay. That's Aristotle's, not
Yeah, and
yours, right?
that's not, that's how the mind works. It can have strange associations, I think.
Yeah. It's very
Yeah.
psychological, I would say, even psychoanalytic. It's like the stream of consciousness technique in a
Mhm.
modernist novel. A lot of people even try actively to write. They are learning to write from other YouTube videos
Mm.
to write in stream of consciousness technique,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's becoming very kind of popular
Yeah,
now.
so even if you're not a writer, you can just like practice it as a way of inculcating your logic and through it your memory.
Yeah, yeah. I think it can be a really interesting exercise. But Aristotelian remembrance is also very physical, unlike, how Proust or Joyce depicted, where it's sort of consciousness moving. But in Aristotle, he again gives kind of an example of if someone throws a stone. So once you release it, you can't stop it. That's why when you cannot remember something, and that happens to me all the time. I just have a vague kind of physical sense, but I cannot exactly recall, and that creates kind of that physically bothers us. So that's what Aristotle understands as remembrance.
Yeah, that is a very physical metaphor. I feel like Aristotle's remembrance is like a time travel into the recesses of the mind, so inward time travel.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great analogy, and he posits this time travel within ourselves, as we were saying, an internal time travel, and there are different kinds of actually memory exercises or mnemonic exercises where you had to kind of associate specific objects with specific spaces, and it was part of the medieval curriculum actually, and I think even Shakespeare mentions it in one of his sonnets.
Yeah, yeah, we should do an episode on it.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, but Shubhendu, if recollection or
Hmm.
anamnesis is a search for a missing piece, as you
Hmm.
said, as Aristotle said, doesn't that sound exactly like the structure of a classical Greek tragedy?
Yeah, in tragedy, recognition is really important, and I think you're thinking of anagnorisis,
Ah,
which
yes,
is
that's
kind
the
of
word.
central, after which the fortune falls down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. In Poetics, Aristotle defines anagnorisis or recognition as a change from ignorance to knowledge toward knowledge. So think of Oedipus Rex. The entire play is just a painful, externalized act of recollection, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant connection. I mean, in Oedipus, when Oedipus killed his father unknowingly, he lies. That's the kind of thing that happened without any recognition. But later, when he realizes that he's really the killer of his
I'm the
father,
killer.
yeah, that's the sort of successful completion of this syllogism when the pieces come together.
And he gouges his eyes out.
Yeah,
It's just, yeah.
yeah.
But it also implies that the ultimate tragedy isn't death. The ultimate tragedy is the inability to remember.
Hmm. Yeah, or remembering things when it's too late.
Yeah.
And I think that's really an interesting take. And obviously, the Greeks had a lot more time in hand than us. They literally knew the myths inside out. They watched the same plays over and over, so that the ethical points really got into them. But we need to bring the question of memory back to modernity, to our time, right? So, yeah, let's talk about how that shapes modern philosophy.
And we need Hannah Arendt for that. Hannah Arendt viewed slowness, specifically slow thinking,
Hmm.
as a crucial, non-linear, and quiet practice, resisting the frenetic pace of modern life. She makes this point in The Life of the Mind. In her view, memory allows individuals to pause, reflect, and create meaning in a world which is dominated by thoughtlessness and destructive actions. She has a brilliant point that the gift of memory is dangerous to totalitarian rule.
Yeah, yeah, she's so brilliant and prescient. And I remember Arendt emphasizes that the most profound activity is often found in quiet contemplation or doing nothing, as you probably call it. But she also picks up a really interesting fight with Aristotle
Oh, yes.
on the question of memory, no?
Yes, yes, it is a respectful but
Hmm.
important fight. She calls Aristotle the most sober of the great thinkers, but her critique is quite devastating. So she argues that Aristotle and indeed all the ancient Greek philosophers were completely blind to the concept of free will. So Arendt identifies this missing organ in Aristotle's philosophy. His notion of remembrance is about finding logic of the lost time, that is, of the past. But he has no mental organ for the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would not totally agree that Aristotle does not have any sense of future, but he is definitely a philosopher of potentiality. So for Aristotle, the future will have to have some kind of a potential in the past. It's like an unpacking of one of the strands of the past. And he viewed the world through potentiality. So, yeah, it's kind of open ended, but it is tied to the past.
Right, right. But think of the acorn and the oak example
Hmm.
for Aristotle. The oak tree already exists. potentially inside the acorn. The tree is just a consequence of the seed. But Arendt argues that if you view the world in this way, where everything is just a potential waiting to be actualized, then you don't need a will.
True. Yeah. True. True.
So she points out that this is built into the Greek language itself. The Greek word for to know,
Yeah.
eidana,
Yeah.
is derived from the word to see, Eden. To Greeks, you can only know what you have seen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's they are extremely visual, and according to Greeks, if you can't see the future, you can't actually kind of engage with it. So yeah, that makes sense.
So Arendt defines the will as the ability to start something entirely new, something that wasn't already hidden in the seed. So think of it like a row of falling dominoes. If you see the first domino fall, which is the past, Aristotle would suggest that you know exactly what the last domino will do, that is the future, right? But Arendt would say that the will is the ability to interrupt that domino chain. So the will essentially is about something which can interrupt the determinism of the past.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe Aristotle would not say that you'll exactly know, but you will have some sense. But I can see that kind of Arendt is putting the mind in this precarious gap between the past and the future. So we have past as sort of something which is pushing us forward, and we have the future who's pressing us sort of back. We have to worry about what is coming, and there is this middle, the present, which is a kind of always a complex philosophical question because it's a very tiny high pressure gap, and probably is that where Arendt puts the will.
Yes, exactly. So Aristotle sees the future as a biological certainty. The acorn will become the oak tree. Now, Arendt sees the future as an existential uncertainty. We will die, that is certain. But there are many aspects of life which are for the will to shape. Arendt gives us this terrifying, beautiful responsibility of freedom in that gap of the present.
Yeah, I'm not totally sort of sure that there is no idea of freedom. Definitely, there is an idea of freedom in Aristotle, and sort of a respite from the realm of necessity. So there has to be some kind of some kind of an uncertainty in the way the domino chain would unfold, and that is where the conscious cultivation of leisure lies. Uh, yeah, but yeah, but
Yeah, Arendt is certainly more focused on the future. Like
hmm.
she is talking about basically moving into the future with a really painful past, like the Holocaust, for example.
Yeah, yes, I totally agree that it's definitely kind of in our in the memories more seems to be more directly related to ethics.
Yeah, Arendt believed in the responsibility to know the past and to endure this knowledge. This enduring requires a slow and a careful engagement with history. And she also connects true forgiveness with memory. Forgiveness cannot happen with historical amnesia, especially amnesia about collective historical trauma like the Holocaust or like slavery.
Yeah, this is really kind of fascinating that Arendt frames forgiveness as a structural power rather than as a personal emotion. And that's really important because kind of she connects ethics with the everyday, right? So I have a question, and I do not want to frame this facetiously, but I know that Arendt anchors ethics in the everyday, in the ordinary experience. So how does Arendt's great philosophy of memory and of the present help us on a Tuesday afternoon when we are just stressed and tired?
It helps because it explains why we feel so exhausted. Aaron says that physically the present doesn't actually exist. Think about it. Like the moment you try to pin down now, it's
Hmm.
already gone. It's already the past, and the future hasn't happened yet. So, strictly speaking, we are trapped on a treadmill.
Hmm.
Arendt calls it the relentless chain of nows.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the autoplay feature on Netflix, which I really hate. Kind of it immediately pushes you forward before the moment ends, and there is no pause.
Yeah, exactly. The default state of nature and the default state of the algorithm is to keep you running. If you don't do anything, the chain of nows will just drag you from birth to death without ever really stopping to say, I am here now. But Arendt says that the human mind has a superpower. It can interrupt.
Yeah, it's a really interesting argument that
Yeah.
she's kind of framing freedom in some sense negatively as the
Yes,
ability to
yes.
interrupt.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
She argues that every time we stop to think, every time we reflect or judge or remember, we are fighting the physics of the universe. We are pushing the past back and holding the future at bay. We are literally hacking time, to create and expand the space of the present that didn't exist before. So Arendt calls this the gap.
right, right. Yeah, and that is what slowness is, right? Philosophically, it's the enduring present of Henri Bergson. Most of us think of time like a clock which just goes into this kind of tick-tock rhythm. The past is gone and the present is a vanishing point. But Bergson, who's a French 20th century great philosopher, he says that real time is more like a melody. So when you listen to a song, you don't hear one isolated note at a time. The note from a second ago is still ringing in your mind.
So when Aaron tells us to stand in the gap, she's telling us to stop living in clock time, which is just anxiety, and to start living in musical time.
Yeah, that's a great illustration, and we must discuss Bergson in the future.
Yeah, yeah. It is a flow of the present where the past still lingers, right? Slowness. It isn't about being lazy. It isn't about taking a nap. I mean, I love naps,
As
like
do
you know.
I. Yeah.
But it is the refusal to be dragged along by the algorithm of time, which snatches us from the fragrance of time, in the words of
Byung
Byung
Chul
Chul
Han,
Han,
yeah.
as we discussed in our previous episode.
And we still kind of and what holds all this together is in some sense memory, right?
Yeah.
That's what ensures that the music of the previous moment is still lingering because we are remembering it. So memory is the anchor, and when you remember, you are stopping the relentless chain of the now. You are building sort of a home or a nest in time, and you are creating this melody of time. That's why slowness is so important philosophically.
So, for the rest of this week, don't just let the timeline scroll past you. Stop, remember something, widen the gap of the present moment to truly have your leisure as emotional and intellectual and physical nourishment. And until the next episode, stay
Stay
anti
anti-clockwise.
clockwise.